Hi, so today I'm going to talk about side effects that I experienced from chemo treatment number 2 through chemo treatment number 7 and some lessons that I learned along the way. So the first two side effects that I experienced were fatigue and food sensitivity, and I went into more detail about these side effects in a previous video, so I'm going to put a link to that one somewhere up here where you can get more information on those. So I don't want to be redundant and talk about the same things in this video, but there is a caveat to food sensitivity. With my sensitivity to sugar, I mentioned in this previous video that I had started chemo in December, and it was just when my neighbors were starting to pass around Christmas cookies, holiday cookies. So after chemo number 3, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to try some cookies to see if my stomach could handle it. So I did try a little bit of a cookie and my stomach was fine. And then I had half of the cookie, my stomach was still fine. And then I finished a whole cookie and my stomach was actually fine. So then I binged on Christmas cookies, but I would not recommend other people doing that. My self-control was out the window because it had been so long since I had had sugar or sweets in general, but there is this caveat, so I'm not sure exactly why that happened, and if you happen to know why, definitely leave a comment below. But I think it was about my 3rd chemo treatment. Once I started testing the waters a little bit, I was so much better. I was really able to handle a lot more Christmas cookies than I should have ingested. So the moral of the story is not to binge like I did, but I think the food sensitivity can get better or be sensitive at one time and not so sensitive at another. A new side effect that I started experiencing was mouth sores, and I got sores on like my bottom gums, and I also got sores on my tongue and then also on the inside of my cheek. So those were obviously not extremely pleasant, but they also were not the worst. I think the hardest time for me was when I had about 3 at once. That was a little bit rough, but again, it wasn't like I couldn't function. It just was a little bit painful. Another side effect that I had was having a runny nose. And I feel like I had a runny nose all the time. This is gonna be TMI, but I know I'm not the only one. I can't be the only one who this has happened to. But you know when you get a runny nose literally from nowhere and you either feel or you see the drip falling out of your nose? That happened to me every day. I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. My nose was a leaking faucet, you get the point. Another side effect that I had was bloody noses. And again, these bloody noses would kind of come out of nowhere. I would be playing with my daughter and then all of a sudden she would tell me, "Mommy, you have a bloody nose." So it happened relatively frequently. It was probably about 2 a week. Another side effect that I had was major teeth and gum sensitivity. And I think it was around treatment number 4 or 5. But I would brush my teeth and there would be blood in my toothbrush or blood dropping into the sink. Another side effect that I had was body temperature irregularity. And so this is not actually from chemo. This was from one of my targeted therapies, or both of my targeted therapies, Herceptin and Perjeta. I looked it up and I found that those therapies can cause this. So I was either too cold or too hot, and I was never in between. So that was a little bit frustrating. I think around chemo number 7, I started experiencing joint pain, specifically in my knees. And the way that I noticed this is that when I get my labs drawn at the cancer center, it's on the 1st floor. And then when I go to chemo, it's on the 2nd floor. And I would always take the steps up to the chemo area, and I started noticing that my knees were really hurting when I was taking those steps. It never got to the point that I stopped taking the steps, although maybe I should have, looking back on it now. And also at home, you know, playing on the floor with my 4-year-old or my 1-year-old, standing up from sitting on the floor or bending down to sitting on the floor, which, as you can imagine, happens many times a day. That was starting to get a little bit difficult as well with my knee pain. Another side effect was chemo brain. Oh my gosh. In my humble opinion, chemo brain is like pregnancy brain on steroids. Just an example of this is I lost my phone every single day, multiple times a day. I also really had a hard time keeping track of whether I had just thought something to myself or if I had actually said something to whoever I was around, whether it was my parents or my husband or even my toddler. I couldn't remember if I had just said something or if I had just thought something. Around chemo number 7, I also did start experiencing some neuropathy in my thumbs. It was really interesting. It was only my thumbs, and it was a numbing or tingling sensation. It was never to the point that I couldn't use my thumbs. I could still grab and hold on to things perfectly fine, but I definitely was feeling that sensation. And interestingly, it also didn't last very long. I think it was for just like a week, and then it went away. Another side effect was skin sensitivity. I definitely started experiencing some serious skin sensitivity probably around treatment number 4. And the way that I noticed this is that my skin got really, really dry. This is gonna be TMI, but anytime I took off an article of clothing, whether it was my shirt or my pants, I would see this poof of white flakes, and that was my skin. So, very, very dry skin, and it was also very sensitive, and it was mostly sensitivity of the skin on my arms. I would notice when I was taking off a shirt or putting on a shirt, sometimes it almost felt like I had a minor sunburn on my arms. And you know when you have a minor sunburn, when you touch the skin, it kind of hurts. I mean, it's not crazy painful, but it's a little bit painful. So I felt that in my arms a little bit. Another side effect was hair loss. So around treatment number 4 was where I started noticing some significant hair loss. Every day I would wake up and I would look at my pillow, and because I had shaved my head already, I would see these tiny little hairs all over my pillow. Also, any time that I would run my hands over my head and look at my hand, I would see a lot of the tiny little hairs on my hand too. Just a little side note. I lost probably about 65% of my hair on my head, but the hair on my legs held on strong. They held on for dear life. They stayed on there like it was no one's business. I think I mentioned in a previous video, which I will put up here, that I wasn't going to be shaving because I knew that with chemo, your skin gets really sensitive. So yeah, I didn't shave my legs, but thankfully I was getting chemo during the winter, so no one else could really tell. Oh, and I also mentioned this in the video about chemo number 1, but diarrhea was also a continuous side effect. So in all of my videos about chemo side effects, you can just assume that I was continuing to have diarrhea. I'll just put that on the table. So in terms of lessons that I learned regarding food sensitivity, I will again put this link back up to the side effects that I had after my very first chemotherapy because I touched on that in that video. When it came to mouth sores, basically the things that I did were I avoided spicy, salty, and acidic foods. Something else that can help with mouth sores is if you brush your teeth a few times a day, avoiding mouthwash with alcohol, and rinsing out your mouth a few times a day. In terms of bloody noses and runny noses, tissues, tissues, tissues. Seriously, however many tissues you're thinking about getting, get more. Also, something that you could do is you could put a humidifier in your room, and that will help moisten the air and hopefully help you in terms of the bloody noses. In terms of teeth sensitivity, something that you can do is you can buy a soft bristle toothbrush. That definitely helped me a lot. Prior to me starting chemo, I was using an electric toothbrush, and that was way too much for my teeth and my gums once I started getting chemo. And I had actually just gone to the dentist, and I told them that I was about to start getting chemo, so they gave me a soft bristle toothbrush, and that helped a lot. Also, using a mouthwash without alcohol in it. In terms of body temperature irregularity, something that I would recommend is getting some lightweight sweaters. Unfortunately, I don't really have that many of those, so I was constantly wearing a really warm sweater or taking it off or putting it back on. So something that I think would have been helpful is if I had had some lightweight sweaters. That would have helped. And when you are feeling hot, a good old fan definitely does the trick. In terms of skin sensitivity and dryness, I would definitely recommend getting a good quality body lotion, and I'll put a picture of it somewhere over here. But yeah, the Gold Bond Overnight Lotion was amazing for me to use. That stuff seriously moisturizes the crap out of your skin. In terms of diarrhea, Imodium is going to be your best friend. I probably took Imodium about 2 times a week, every single week, for the 12 weeks that I was getting chemotherapy. And thankfully, it works like a charm. Okay, so that is it in terms of my side effects from chemo treatments number 2 through 7. In an upcoming video, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about hair loss, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye.